I've not had a linear career path, and some of the people listening will probably relate to that. And for whatever reason, I just need to say that's okay because you end up finding your way to where you're supposed to be. And when something lights you up, you got to follow that because that's where the passion and that's where the gifts that you are here to give to people, the people you're here to serve, that's where you're going to be able to find those people that you're here to serve. And this is what happened with communications coaching. I had done a lot of different types of coaching, leadership. I had done sales coaching, all kinds. And I liked it. But what really lit me up was when I was able to give people tools on how to communicate. So, how does someone problem solve, make decisions, discuss things with you? And if you can figure out how that other person communicates, and then just even in that moment, figure out how to communicate to them in their behavioral style, their defensive gates go down. There's magic. It's literally like an emotional intelligence level raises in
Mm.
that individual conversation, and you're going to see a different result. And so I thought, you know what? There's just not enough people practicing this. This isn't a very old thing that's been out. It's not like it's something new, but we're not using it, especially in leadership roles. So whenever I finally decided, I think I know what I want to do when I grow up, is that I really want to help people learn to communicate. And it sounds really simple, but we're so stuck in the way that we do things, especially as if we get into a leadership role, we've got a lot of hats that we're wearing.
Yeah.
And so the things that we can go on autopilot, we want to. And then the things that we have to do that are not the fun things, we only do those if we're forced to. So when it's something that's an internal force, like you need to do it yourself and somebody externally is not telling you to do it, sometimes you let that go by the wayside. And communication is one of them. Because we think if
Mhm.
we'll just communicate in our style, they'll just need to get to know me or get to know how I do things, right?
Right.
Well, you're only wrong about 60% of the time when you do that.
I love what you just said there, Shelly, around autopilot. So if I'm hearing you correctly, we can leave this autopilot because there are certain things in our day that do need to be on autopilot, for lack of a better word, but just not conscious awareness to. And what I'm hearing you say is communication is not one of those places where we should be on autopilot. And yet, how many of us do that?
We all do it. We all do
Yeah.
it. We do it with our spouse, we do it with our kids, and especially women in leadership. I feel like there's a lot of things that they're doing as well that are not just in the role, but during the day, you got to be thinking about those things, right? I got to pick up my son at 4 o'clock from practice. I've got to make sure I get this and this done before I do that. That's always integrated into what we're thinking for the day. So it's easy to go on autopilot on the things that we're not accountable to ourselves on. And communication accountability is personal. If
Mm.
you are expecting somebody else to hold you accountable for that communication piece, that's never gonna work. You have to own that.
It's such a loaded word, accountability. I mean, I do lots of values work with clients, and accountability is like, well, they need to be accountable. No, you need to be accountable. So I really appreciate what you're saying there. So tell us, like, how did role identity theory, or what's it called?
Yeah, identity role theory. Mhm.
So, how did that show up for you, and why did it become something that you thought was really going to help your clients in terms of coming off of autopilot and communicating better?
When I was in a sales training franchise, I had a lot of clients in that franchise and we had a lot of tools available to us. And this wasn't specific to the franchise, this tool, it was been around a while. But I noticed when I did speaking engagements or whenever I did, intros to new client classes, that when I talked about this, it resonated with people, whether they were female or male or in leadership or not in leadership. And it started kind of creating a life of its own where I would say, you know what? This lady would say, my husband has a sales team. Would you do their sales kickoff with this?
Mm.
Because it's something that people can easily digest, super easy to digest, but it resonates so largely in the short amount of time that you explain it that it starts to make you really think outside the box. It gives you some permission to understand why you might be doing the things you're doing or why there's reactive things happening in your life based on some previous experiences that you need to be conscious of so that you are intentionally changing direction on those and changing your mindset.
Right. Now, and let's before we get into hearing about it, why do you think that this is so important in today's workplace? Like, why do we even really need to give a shit about this?
Well, first of all, communication is the number one thing that we have in every area of our life, regardless of our work. But the problem is that we are getting to a situation now, especially after COVID, where people are wanting to feel something. They want to feel like they're accepted. They want to feel like they are needed at that role. They want to feel like the company, appreciates them instead of just being a number. We're tired of, I mean, we don't have pensions anymore, Carolyn. So staying at a job for 30 years, companies are not going to be able to just hold that and hold people under their thumb with that anymore. And besides that, I feel like we've launched after COVID into a new, entrepreneurial like phase of culture that people are challenging themselves to say, maybe I could do something on my own, or maybe, if they feel like they can gather that courage. The problem is that the organizations that we work for, they're in the day to day, on the business, like they're not looking in the business. And so when we
Mm,
have our people on the business is great. But, there's something that I coach in my coaching program that is called the three-legged stool. The three-legged stool is you can put anything on those legs, but I always start out with the leadership that we've got a client-facing leg, we've got a bottom line leg, so the business, and then we've got the internal client-facing leg. And if we
mm.
forget about the people that make it run to handle the other two pieces of that stool. And if that leg comes off, guess what happens to the stool? It falls over.
Yep.
And so then every leg is affected. So you can't just silo that out. So if we're not being intentional about communication with our people, they're not feeling like you heard and understood them. They're not feeling important, and they're going to find another place to go. Your most expensive asset and your most expensive liability is your people.
So I'm hearing a real theme of authenticity here. People can sniff through the BS. And so if we aren't showing up in our communication, being present and authentic, if we're not showing up and being real, people just aren't going to really feel valued or wanted and can pick up and go elsewhere.
I also just had a conversation earlier this morning with somebody. She does a lot of like psychotherapy type stuff. And we were talking about the fact that, even over Zoom, we have a sixth sense as humans. And so if you're not being authentically you, or you're extending yourself into another behavioral style because you think you need to be effective in that role, people feel that. And what
Mm.
happens is that we lose trust. I don't care how much trust you've built over time. If they feel every time they talk to you that this isn't the real version of you, the shoe's going to drop later. And I don't know what that feeling, I don't know where it's coming from, but I just feel it. You're not going to get the best version of your people.